When you hear 2x4, what do you think of? Construction? Maybe building homes? Maybe more of like the internal frames of stuff, correct? But what if I told you you could build some really nice furniture with it? That just doesn't sound right, does it? But I've done it. Now I've compiled a number of tips just for you to help you do just that. Now this process first starts in store. We need to find not only good prices, but the best wood possible. If we go look over at the normal 2x4 section, you'll find a lot of wood that's already warped, twisted, and just bowed just far beyond than you can ever use. You can literally search through some of these piles for potentially hours and barely find any usable wood. So the first thing I would suggest is to look beyond the normal 2x4 pile. A lot of times if you go around the corner of the store, maybe down a different aisle, you'll find what they call premium wood. And if you look at this piece here, you don't see any knots in it. And that's because this is one of the premium boards. Now in my store, this costs about 15 to 20 cents. Yes, just 15 to 20 cents more than your standard 2x4. Yeah, that's definitely worth going with this better quality wood than your standard 2x4. Now if by chance your store doesn't carry this premium lumber, or maybe you just can't find it, you have to work with your standard 2x4s. Okay, well here's a few things you need to look out for when you're going through them. First off, if it is warped at the store, it will only get worse when you get it home. So try to avoid any kind of warp or twist whenever possible. Next up, pick up your wood, toss it around, gently rub your hand across it. If it feels wet or if it feels heavy, there's a good chance it is still internally wet and needs to dry. But guess what? As it starts to dry, it's going to start moving on you. It's going to twist a little bit. It's possibly going to warp on you. So therefore, as you're working with it, well, it's just going to cause havoc to all of your projects. So if it is wet, avoid this as much as possible. Now let's look at the ends of our boards. As you can tell, these are two completely different cuts. One has the pith or the center of the tree, and one does not. Now the pith can sometimes be difficult to dry out. And as we go to cut boards with the pith, there's a very good chance there's a lot more internal stresses with these than there are the boards without. So if you can, avoid the pith when possible. Next up, let's look at the rings. We want to try and get the boards with the rings that are a little bit tighter together. The ones with them a little bit far apart, well, these trees grew a lot faster, and there's a tendency that these are not nearly as strong or as robust as handling the weight and the stresses as furniture as these tighter rings. And another technique that I just recently started using was, let's look at both ends of your boards. So look at one side, see how the rings are set up. Now flip it over and see if they are identical on the other. If not, there's a very good chance that the board was cut at an angle through the tree, or maybe even off of a large limb, thus creating additional stresses internal in your board. So as you cut it, there's a good chance those stresses might release and start to twist on you. Once you've acquired your wood and you've brought it home, it's a good idea to give it some time to acclimate to your shop or your garage or wherever you're planning on storing this. Now you want this to be in a cooler, drier place so that it doesn't have a tendency to absorb moisture. Also, when possible, keep it up off the floor. The floor has a tendency to allow moisture to seep through up in your wood, causing you problems. Now I know this isn't always possible, but when you can, try to avoid that. Now, if needed, you can always go buy yourself a dehumidifier. This will allow you to keep the humidity in your shop a lot lower, thus making wood a little bit more predictable when you work with it. Now let's talk about the design of our projects and make them look really good. But we do have to keep in mind that we need to figure out exactly what we're going to make ahead of time. Because we don't just want to run out in our shop, make a bunch of cuts in some boards, set them down, run inside, do stuff for a week or two, come back out in your shop and expect everything to be the same, because there's a good chance it won't. Whenever you make cuts into wood, those external forces and the internal forces of the board start reacting with each other. So if you make cuts in your wood and then you set it down and let it sit there for a long period of time, there's a good chance you're going to come back and something's going to not fit right because everything's moved just a little bit. Wood moves. It's one of those materials that just never ending expands and contracts. Now it's on a very minor scale, but it does. So whenever you're about to make your cuts, make sure you know exactly what you're going to assemble so that once you do, it kind of locks everything in place. You don't have a ton of external movement and it keeps everything from just driving you crazy. Now that we're ready to build, how do we take something that's so big and bulky and turn it into something pretty? Well, it has to do with angles, colors, overlapping, and more. So let's dig in. Let's first look at the end of our board here. This is just a 90-degree angle and it looks big and bulky. But if you take that same type of board and you cut just a little fancy angle on it, this right here is about 1/4 of an inch right here on the end. It completely tricks your eyes and takes it away from that bulkiness. This is a really simple cut. This right here is just an angle cut on the end, leaving a small structure under here, and that's still about 90 degrees to the top edge. Thus, when seen from above, completely tricks your eyes. The great thing about this trick is it can even start to fool other woodworkers. Here recently I was at a large show and my wife pointed out this beautiful table that she loved. As I got closer I realized the tabletop was only about 1/4 inch thick. And so I asked the builder, I was like, how does this last? You know, how well, what's the longevity of something like this? And he told me it's actually a pretty thick piece of wood. Look underneath. And when I did, it was very similar to this, except the angle was slightly further back. But it was an actual about 1 inch thick piece of wood angled with a tiny little edge showing on the end. And it got me. So keep this in mind, it does work. The next step with your 2x4 is to take it, maybe use a jigsaw to cut a nice little curve into it. And with that curve, it definitely takes your eyes away from it looking like a 2x4. Another little benefit is that if you can use both sides, put one maybe above the other and incorporate that into your project, the cool wave in the middle there gives it a totally different look. One other option is if you were to put them back to back. Look at there, look at the curve in that. That right there would definitely give you one really nice leg. Now of course we do have this section right here in the middle that would either have to be filled in or sanded out or cut out. But overall, there's a great way to add a curve and take your eye away from a 2x4. The next step is to actually create like an inset or an offset of your wood. So instead of say like this right here is a corner piece for a leg, that just looks really bulky. But if you offset it, kind of bring one side in a little bit, it throws it off a little bit. Now it looks a lot better when you have a full table setup, so let me show you. Here's a project I built previously. If you notice that the connector in here, the piece that actually holds the two legs together here, I've inset it way in. And that does two things. One, as you're looking down from above, it makes it a little bit harder to see. So it looks like this is a much thinner project. Plus, as you see here where it connects with the actual 2x4 leg here, by connecting that in, it makes this piece, at least right where it connects, looks a little bit thinner so that it kind of takes your eye away from some of that bulkiness. Another great way to improve your project is to actually add a stain to it. This right here can really offset the top and the bottom and make it look just totally different. Now of course each stain is a little different, some are lighter, some are darker. How you want to do your style is totally up to you. But just try and do a definite offset and it'll take your eye away from it. Here's an example of that table I showed you just a second ago. The top of it's dark and the bottom of it is currently unstained. But that total two-tone difference right there really sets it off. Now when we're talking about assembly, it's not a great idea to actually do a butt joint like this. That again looks big and bulky. So how about instead we cut 45-degree angles in both ends and then put it together. Let me show you. Now I've cut both of these at the 45-degree angle, and when we put them together real carefully, doesn't that look so much better than a butt joint? Now of course if it's possible to keep the same grain wrapping around the corner here, that would look even better. But that alone improves this look a whole lot. Now once you have everything glued together and it looks really nice, you can always then go back and cut a little groove in the top or sides here, and then take another little piece of wood and add a little inlay in it. Now of course I'm gonna have to trim this down before I glue it in place, but that'll give you an idea of what it looked like. Now on top of it looking really cool, this will give some additional strength to your joint. And of course you can do it out here on this end as well to make it look really nice. Now if by chance you like an old style looking wood, kind of like a barn wood, go get your new wood and make whatever project you would like. Then get you a hammer and just start beating the mess out of it. You hit it with both ends. You want to kind of abuse this with pliers and screwdrivers and whatever else, maybe even a nail or two, and just beat into it. Now don't overdo it, but make it look really just old and abused. Then go get some nice old graying stain, or maybe if they have a barnwood stain or whatever you'd like. And then add that to it, coat it real nicely and let that dry. Then to top it off, go get some spray paint. Spray it into a little container, put on a glove, dip some fingers in and just flick it onto your wood. I mean, just randomly flick it, just a few places, and that will look really good. Now, of course, we can't forget about the feet of our project, or the base. For example, let's say you have a real wide base and this whole bottom here is touching the floor. It's a bad idea. And the reason why is most floors are not flat. They have humps and bumps in them all over. So if you were to have this wide of a base, I almost guarantee you it's gonna rock when sitting in place. So that's gonna look and feel bad. Instead, try to minimize the amount of footprint you have. If you can, try to only have one actual board at each corner touching, but you can make that even better. Remember that angle we cut earlier for the top edge? We can do that for the bottom as well to minimize that footprint for each of our feet, making it less likely for it to sit uneven. Another great way to improve the look is to hide your fasteners or your screws or nails used to assemble everything together. What I like to do is use glue in place of a lot of these. Now, of course, I have to wait for the glue to dry, so that takes some more time, but by doing this, you definitely don't see any nails or screws. Another option is possibly to use dowels. Now, of course, with dowels, you need a doweling jig, and that can cost anywhere from relatively inexpensive to super high end. It depends on what you want to use it for and how often reliable you want it to be, but that's another option. The third one is whenever you're drilling your holes for your screws or nails is to actually create a slightly larger hole over it and then get an actual dowel that will fit in that hole. You can glue it in, cut it off, and sand this down, and that'll look great as well. And last but definitely not least, you need to add a top coat finish. This could be a urethane, a spar urethane, a polyurethane. Really just depends on what you like. Some of them are water-based, some of them are oil-based. The water-based tends to dry a lot faster. The oil-based usually is a little bit thicker of a coat and is a little more resistant than the water-based. The water-based usually you have to put multiple coats on it to get it nice and thick. Now, of course, this right here will help you prevent stains, it'll help prevent water absorption into your project, and overall movement that will happen with humidity and temperature changes. Now, for those of you who are beginning, this may seem like a lot of information to remember, but the main thing is to just get out in your shop and practice. Get out there, get the muscle memory right, get out there and make sure you just come up with ideas and figure out ways to solve problems. And once you get that in your head, you'll be able to think of it really, really quick next time and be able to fix any kind of issues you have. So, with that said, I hope you can get out in your shop and have fun building.